Everyone, I will continue the talk with the physiological aspect of this paper. Uh, as introduction, I have to remind you again that the nervous system is characterized by highly ordered synaptic connection between neurons, and one of the best examples is sensory innervation of spinal motor neurons. And this paper is a very old one. It's about they published it about 40 years ago, and uh, at the time they were already demonstrated that stretch reflexes are in triceps brachii muscle of amphibians, and therefore they use this muscle system to study the study that how a specificity of sensory motor synapses are in Bullfrog. And as you can see here in the first slide, we have two superimposed traces, one here, the upper trace and the lower trace. The upper trace is a supra threshold and shows the antidromic action potential with the latency of about between A to B about 2 milliseconds. And the sub threshold, the lower trace is a sub threshold, and it's basically a slightly lower the synaptic potential is a slightly lower has a slightly lower stimulus strength, and the latency of these synaptic potentials in triceps motor neurons range from 2 to 5, and they consider this range to be for monosynaptic, and triceps synaptic potentials with longer latencies were rarely seen. Now about homonymous and heteronymous, I have to first say that homonymous sensory inputs are innervating the same muscle, whether the heteronymous inputs can originate from the other muscles, and each of these traces are average of about 5 to 10 responses, and which I will tell you later that how they come up with this. Although there are some problems associated with measuring homonymous sensory inputs, they could easily observe the homonymous sensory inputs, but the two problems are, one is that this stimulus strength is sufficient to activate all sensory fibers, and also can affect the antidromic impulse, which later can obscure the synaptic potential. And the other problem also is that we have contamination here, and this contamination is that this potential these potentials are getting contaminated by coupling potentials from the antidromic impulses in neighboring motor neurons. So for this reason, they couldn't show this in a more in a histogram model, but as you can see here, they use the data, they estimate the data, the EPSP homonymous EPSBs in by a direct method, and for this reason they just subtract the average amplitude of coupling from the average amplitude of the homonymous synaptic potential measured in progression. And as you can see here, when we talk about the homonymous inputs, it's about the sensory inputs to the motor neurons, the same, from the same muscle, medial triceps. And here the larger amplitude is 1.94 millivolt within 33 neurons, and internal and external triceps, which is internal and external triceps together with internal and external triceps of motor neuron, which is about 0.92 among 24 neurons. And the next one is about heteronymous synaptic potential. Here we have also we can its appearance, we can see the synaptic projection from sensory fibers innervating the heteronymous muscles, and but there aren't two problems. These synaptic potentials are not contaminated by motor neuronal coupling, and also they're not obscured by antidromic action potential. Therefore, the heteronymous sensory input from the medial the medial triceps together medial triceps is about 2 times larger as the heteronymous input from the combined internal and external triceps with medial triceps. As also here you can see the values is we have a much larger amplitude here compared to the internal external triceps medial, also medial. As also I mentioned, for the homonymous synaptic potential, they couldn't use this histogram because of those limitations. And then in the next part, we want to observe that what was the result for triceps input to other motor neurons. And for the other motor neurons, you can see also the triceps to the subscapularis and pectoralis and deltoides. And as you can see here, in those three motor neurons, only about 5% of all examples, I think it was near to 200 examples, they receive about between maybe less than half of 0.5 millivolt from either the medial or internal triceps nerves. And thus, therefore, one of the main take-home message from the whole presentation is presented here, and which is the specificity of the triceps sensory projection into brachial motor neurons, which is we can conclude is very high, and virtually every triceps motor neuron receive monosynaptic input from the triceps nerves will only a small percentage of non triceps motor neurons did. And other sensory inputs to motor neurons, in contrast that the previous one, it was from triceps to these trees. But also, as you can see here, in contrast to the strong input from the tricep motor neurons you see from their own muscles, the monosynaptic input from other nerves are usually low, and also the you can see the amplitude of subscapularis to triceps, and also pectoralis and deltoids, which compared to the previous graph was histogram was very big. And in the next in the last diagram, you can see that the earliest input from the pectoralis afferent is was about at 7 millisecond later than either the early 3 millisecond or later in a 5 or 4 millisecond component. As the discussion, I have to also mention that this result shows that the tricep muscle sensory afferents specifically innervates certain classes of brachial motor neurons. And also, as additional find out, they found out that although it's they thought that it's this kind of the stretch reflex is much stronger in mammals than in lower vertebrates. The amplitude of the EPSPs in motor neurons evoked by stimulation of heteronymous muscle sensory afferents were comparable in the frog and the cat. So the numbers were the numbers were not that much different as they thought, and that was the maybe a good observation at the time. Thank you for your attention.